After me will be Omar Alfi, who's the managing partner for Pacifico down in Ensenada. Then Haydar Sahtout, member of the board of directors from Arabian Shrimp Company, probably the largest shrimp company in the Middle East. Haydar, is that correct? Almost, okay. And then Thomas Kraft, founder and managing director for Norpac Fisheries Export. So I'm going to talk today. I'm sorry I kind of threw this together quickly, but I also wanted to do a little context for aquaculture and the need for development of it. This is what's going on in the world right now. It's been going on for centuries, but that very smooth graph depicts the growth in world population. Right now we're sitting at about 7 billion people, and by 2050 we'll be sitting closer to 9.5 billion. And the single line there tracks the instantaneous growth rate, and you can see the instantaneous growth rate peaked back in the 1950s after World War II. You can thank my parents for that. And it's dropped down quite a bit, but the corpus, the population size is so great, it's kind of hard to slow down the growth from this point forward. So these people are all going to want something to eat. And if you look at the where we got our protein from in 1980, you can see a breakdown here. About a third of our product came from, a third of our protein came from fish. A small part of that, 3% from aquaculture, and the remainder from capture fisheries. Now compare that to the next bar graph at 2011, and you can see this is the demand below the red line there. You can see we need about 300 million metric tons more than we needed just 31 years ago. And again, fish makes up about a third of the overall makeup, but half of that is coming from aquaculture now, and the other half is coming from capture fisheries. And if you look at what the projected growth in the world population is to 2050, you'll see we need another 300 million metric tons in the next 35 years or so. So where are we going to get that from? If you listen to PETA's idea is, well, let's just all eat soybeans. We don't have to, let's not eat any animals at all. Let's just eat all the soybeans and rice and everything we want. Unfortunately, there's costs associated with that as well. A recent article in the New York Times suggests that every person in America consumes 300 gallons of California water, fresh water, a week based on the produce that we produce here. We're feeding the nation, and that nation has a cost in resources here in California, and one of them is fresh water. So switching over to a completely vegetable diet isn't exactly the right way to go either. Plus, I like a cheeseburger once in a while, and I know some of the people in the audience do. So if we were to look at where that 300 million metric tons was going to come from, if we were to do that all with beef or mutton, look at the CO2 production that occurs from that. And compare that with down there in the right hand, down further to the right, fish aquaculture, cage farming, which is the type of aquaculture I'm going to be talking about, compared to beef or cattle. Now, of course, brown algae, brown kelp's quite a bit more efficient that way. It absorbs CO2, but the reality is we're not going to switch over to kelp burgers, and we're going to want a diversity. Now, if you look at what's going on in the world right now, just as an example, you look at the Mediterranean Sea, all 16 nations around the Mediterranean Sea are actively involved in cage farming, and many of those countries are just as sophisticated and environmentally friendly as we are. And yet, if you look at the lower left-hand picture there, that's a European sea bass sold at Whole Foods in La Jolla for $12.99 a pound, with a little sign on it that says sustainably grown in the islands of Greece. To the right of that is a striped bass that was grown in Omar's farm down in Ensenada for sale in Encinitas, where I live, in North San Diego County. We're getting a lot of our seafood from somewhere else. Why don't we create the jobs and the tax base here in this country? So we've come up with trying to create the first federally permitted farm in open water in the US, and it's called Rose Canyon Fisheries. It'll be 4 miles off the coast of San Diego. We have these different species to work with. The primary one we want to focus on is the California yellowtail. The reason we like that species is because right now all the hamachi you eat in a sushi bar comes from a farm, but it comes from a farm either from Australia or from Japan. So why don't we grow the yellowtail, the hamachi ourselves, and create the job base here, create the revenue, and keep that money in this country instead of sending it off to Japan. They've got plenty of money of their own. So finding the right site, this is where we start talking about collaboration, which is, I understand, the theme of what we're talking about today. So finding the right farm site. We think, hey, it's a big ocean out there. How big could the farm need to be? It's estimated by NOAA that to feed the entire U.S. population, all the farm food from the ocean that it wants to consume in a year, would take an area in our EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone, the size of, I think it's Vermont. So we're talking about a de minimis amount of space in a rather large ocean. But you know, where are we going to find that space to do it? Because there's a lot of other people that work in the ocean, and that's where the concept of marine spatial planning comes in. We have all these different uses. We have recreation, we have areas we want to set aside for protection, we have oil, we have existing commercial fishing, and we have habitat preservation. So first thing to do is start looking at constraints. This is the Southern California Bight from Point Arguello down to the Mexican border, and these are just a few of the things that are in the way of developing aquaculture. You have that big red band is navigational. That's for freighters and oil tankers coming in and out of Long Beach Harbor. You've got protected areas in blue. You've got some military areas, that sort of thing. So we started working with the folks at the University of California, Santa Barbara Bren School in a Sea Grant funded program. Where are the sites where we might be able to grow seafood in Southern California? And they did an analysis looking at commercial fishing, the right depth and profiles, what's from this depth to that depth, avoiding habitats, avoiding commercial fishing operations, avoiding the things that you saw on that chart before. And this is what they came up with. It basically, if they look at net present value analysis, they predict that shellfish farming done in the northern part of the Southern California Bight would be the most advantageous, and then finfish in the southern part. They've identified over 500 square kilometers of space that would be suitable for aquaculture. Now that sounds like a great starting point, and it talks about what we might be able to do with that available space. Unfortunately, it isn't until you actually pick a spot that you end up getting into the really down into the weeds, so to speak. We put our permit applications in, Paula, what, 2 years ago? Over 2 years ago, and this last year, the Navy came back, and who we've been working with for a decade, and said, yeah, not right there, put it over here. And then the Army Corps interpreted that as, well, maybe they don't want you anywhere in San Diego. So we had to back up and start over again and start looking at individual sites within San Diego County. So this progression of let's start with the military, then let's look at navigational concerns relative to the military and every other user of the ocean, then we'll look at protected species and habitats, and then finally get down to commercial and recreational fishing. So basically, you can only grow the fish in certain areas. You can't be where the water's too deep or it's too shallow, and you can't be over certain habitats. But when you start narrowing it down, it turns out the ocean's not nearly as big as we'd like it to be, or would think it would be. So this is the beginning of their analysis. This was all done by the National Ocean Service Laboratory in Beaufort, North Carolina. And so the blue area represents the appropriate depth profile that we would be able to use. That's deeper than 100 feet and shallower than 300 feet. And then the black line down there, the black arc, represents 25 miles. Maximum distance we'd probably want to work from port, from San Diego Bay. Then outside of the 3 nautical mile limit, represents the federal water, so we'd want to permit it. So that hashed blue area is what we have available. Now overlay to that, the Navy operations in San Diego, and all of a sudden becomes a much smaller piece of property. You can see here that they've identified 5 different sites that have the right contour, the right depth profile, but have different levels of interaction with military operations. And then they also step back and look at other types of vessel navigational interactions, and basically created a non-parametric analysis that allow us to pick which out of the best 8 sites would be the one with the least interference with Navy and navigational operations. Wow, I mean, that's weeks and weeks of work, and how's the average farmer supposed to have this sort of capability? So we need to have, if we really want aquaculture to kick off, what we ought to be trying to do is identify these situations, these capabilities on the front end, much like we would do zoning. So, then one of the other concerns that's come up about aquaculture development is, what about effluent? What about what happens with the fish waste, the nitrogen, the metabolic waste that comes off of the fish? So we've been working with a modeling group, again out of the North Carolina guys, also with the University of Southern California, some private consultants, NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, and the Long Beach Aquarium, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife here in California, to take a look at, well, if we proposed a farm of 5,000 tons, what impact would that have on the wild? So the first thing you have to do is figure out what are all the interactions between the water column, the faunal populations that live on the bottom. At what point does nutrients get so high that it triggers algal blooms, that sort of thing. And what's the depth of the water and the hydrography of it? What's the current flow and all that? So these are all parameters, input parameters to the model that can be tested over time. And we've deployed a current meter at our proposed site, which then gives direction and speed of current and report that feeds into the model. And the predictive model suggests that looking just at carbon as the added carbon that would occur on the bottom, that even at 5,000 tons of production, the amount of increased carbon, because of the depth and the current flow, the increased carbon would be undetectable by current standards. So this is the kind of a priority work that ought to be done so that the average guy that wants to step up and make a $20, $30 million investment in farming doesn't have to bring all these guys together. So if we could create zones that don't interfere with other uses and meet the environmental criteria that minimize impacts to the environment, that's the type of work that could be done now that would really allow this industry to grow. A few years ago, the Office of Science and Technology, working with the Interagency Working Group for Aquaculture, which is a combination of all the different federal agencies that have anything to do with permitting, got together and they advanced 9 strategic goals to work on for the next 5 years that would promote aquaculture, or not so much promote it, but answer some of the questions. And I would submit that the best way to work on these types of questions are with active farms. We can model in computers, we can do things in the laboratory, but until you've got 3,000 to 4,000 tons of fish out there, you don't really know what the actual impact will be or not be on the environment. You also don't have a handle on what the actual benefit to the economy is going to be. It's great to put an economist in a room and let him work his calculator, but the reality is you don't see cash actually moving around. You don't see jobs created. And this is the type of thing, if we can have demonstration farms that then validate these predictions and then move them to the next level so that we can have a responsible growth in the industry, then that's something that, again, would be very valuable to the research community. To answer a lot of these questions, there isn't one organization that's going to be able to do that. You need economists, you need anthropologists, you need veterinarians, you need nutritionists, you need a wide range of capability to take a look at these questions. And they all get facilitated by actually having an industry that can identify what the actual problems are so they can be resolved by the scientific community. These are the partners that we've already identified that we're working with on a technological level, on a regulatory level, for nutrition and for fish health. And we have a great group of organizations we're working with that help us move it forward, but then again, we also need to have the actual farm to prove this capability. And with that, I'd close it and ask the next speaker to come up, but I'd point out the quote here at the bottom. With Earth's burgeoning populations to feed, we must turn to the sea with new understanding and new technology, which learn to farm the sea as we have learned to farm the land. This was Jacques Cousteau back in the 1970s. We're half a lifetime later, and we're really no closer to it in this country than we were back then. With that, I thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Omar Alfi. I want to thank Michael Jones and the Maritime Alliance for inviting us, for including us in the Maritime Alliance community, and giving us a platform to meet like-minded people, to understand the industry, and to continue moving forward. First, I want to thank Don for introducing us, and also for introducing me personally to aquaculture. Indirectly, about 3.5 years ago, Don knew of a company called Pacifico Aquaculture, 70 miles south of the border in Ensenada. and he knew that they needed investors. He also knew one of my partners who was interested in investing in aquaculture, so he put us together. And so that's how this story began for myself 3.5 years ago. My background is actually in finance, private equity, investment banking, but I like to call myself the accidental aquaculture entrepreneur. I've now become an aquaculture entrepreneur, and so far I love it. So just to start the story, this picture that you're seeing is actually a real picture underwater in one of our cages. That's our striped bass swimming around. So here is just a high-level overview of our company. The company is called Pacifico Aquaculture. We're the only producer in the world of ocean-raised striped bass. Some of you may be familiar with striped bass. It's quite a popular fish, sport fishing fish. We acquired this concession, call it 8 years ago, and renewed it 3 years ago with the Mexican government. The site is located 8 miles offshore on Todos Santos Island. If any of you are surfers, you probably know it is also the site of a very large surfing break. The concession is located on 179 hectares of ocean, and one of the reasons that we decided to invest in this company was because of the characteristics of this site and the location of where it is. So number one, the fact that we're, call it an hour from the US border and 3 hours from a major distribution hub, LA, results in a very low carbon footprint compared to the other 90% of seafood imported into the US, and of course a cost advantage as well. The site itself has a submarine canyon right in front of it, which really helps with cleansing, keeps the site very clean, kind of in line with those sustainable and responsible aquaculture practices that we mentioned, and that what Don has spoken about. We're doing regular benthic sampling, water quality sampling, to make sure that as our company grows, as our farm grows, we don't have an effect on the environment as well. As I said, so the site is ideal for growing fish. Very strong cleansing, very good current flow, and the fact that it's 8 miles offshore gives us very clean oceanic water, which results in a high-quality product. So a little bit of overview on the company. We're now 110 employees. When we invested in the company back in 2013, we were at 30, so we've grown quite rapidly. We have current biomass of, that's a little outdated as of a month, so it's around 700 tons now, with capacity installed currently of 2,000 tons. Our plan is to get to around the same size as what Don's talking about for Rose Canyon, of around 5,000 tons a year. Let's move on to the next slide. So this is just to give you kind of a very high-level overview of how aquaculture works, at least in our context. There are very many different contexts of aquaculture. From our perspective, we begin with broodstock, which are sexually mature fish that can provide juveniles for us. We take care of them year-round. We provide high nutritional value, make sure that they're very healthy and happy. Once a year, this species in particular spawns once a year. They provide us with eggs. We incubate those eggs. We take care of the juveniles in our hatchery for 60 to 90 days. We then move them out to the open ocean grow-out site that I mentioned to you. They live there for 1 to 3 years, depending on how big we want to get the fish. We then harvest them on site, process them in Ensenada, and they're at our markets in LA and California the next day. So you can imagine, fresh product, high quality grown in the open ocean. And the entire life cycle and environment is controlled to make sure that it's as sustainable as possible, as high quality as possible, and delivered efficiently. This is just a very high-level timeline of the company, of how we've grown, where we've gotten to. As I said, I joined in 2013. You could see in July of 2013, that was when the new investor group, who was us, joined. Previously, the company had originally been a bluefin ranch. I don't know if some of you may be aware of bluefin ranches that are down in Ensenada, in Baja California. The owners at the time decided to convert it to aquaculture. They wanted to go in a much more sustainable route, to not capture wild fish. And so actually in May 2010, they received their first striped bass fingerlings from Don and Paula at Hub SeaWorld Research Institute. And those were the first, that was a pilot crop that the original investors, the original owners had worked on for the farm. They then moved into white sea bass as well, also sourced from Hubs. So there's a long history of Pacifico and Hubs working together and collaborating. We then joined in July, as I mentioned. renewed the concession, so gave us another 10 years to start developing and building this company. We were also recognized as the best aquaculture practices operator in Mexico. Up until now, the only company in Mexico to receive that award. And we realized the next thing we had to do was build a hatchery, learn how to produce our own juveniles, become self-sufficient. We also realized that this type of knowledge, this type of capability is not very prevalent in Mexico or on the West Coast. So we had to go and find it. We went to NC State, actually, and found an expert in striped bass reproductive biology, a PhD. Her name is Valerie Williams. So we work closely with now her former university. And then to find farm operators, to find people who could help us at the farm, we went to Europe, to Greece, where they farm species like Branzino, to Scotland, where they farm salmon, to find experts who know how to do this type of operation, because we didn't want to recreate the wheel. We've slowly but surely grown now over the last 3 years. We're now selling the fish, for the first time selling the fish that we produced in our own hatchery, which is a very exciting development, and slowly but surely growing, planning to double in production next year and double again the year after. One of the things that I wanted to highlight and point out was our collaboration efforts that we try and focus on very heavily in Mexico, in our community, and in our region. Given that we're trying to build a new industry, we're trying to build a new company, in a foreign country and in a country that hasn't had this type of operation before, we recognize that we need to work very closely with the government, we need to work very closely with the universities and with the communities. So I'm grateful to have my friend Luis Andres here, actually, Gonzalez, who's from the state of Baja California. He's responsible for aquaculture for the state of Baja. We work very closely with them. We have a policy that all compliance, we comply 100%, if not 110%. And we try to be an example. We try to make sure that we do things the right way, show that we're always going to do things the right way, because otherwise it's a slippery slope and you can never keep up. And through that, we've been able to gain a reputation as a good operator, a company that works with the government, works with the community, works with the university. On the university side, we have collaboration efforts studying nutrition, studying genetics, studying oceanography and the current flow around our site. All of this, number one, to help the company, but also number two, and just as important, is to help the community, help the industry. We view ourselves not just as company builders, but ecosystem builders. Just as Don said, and Michael has spoken about many times, we're building a new industry here, and we need to build an ecosystem. We need to build a cluster of like-minded people who are educated, who have the same goal. And so we feel privileged that we have the Mexican federal government, the state government, and the local university. All of us are working together to build this industry together. I'm very happy and proud to say that we've now become the largest employer from the Marine Biology Department of the local university, the UABC. People are very excited to come work for us in the hatchery and at the farm. And really our goal is to build a burgeoning, growing aquaculture industry that can feed California, that can feed the US, that can feed Mexico at a much lower environmental cost and a much lower financial cost, but for the same quality of product that you can get in Europe, in Asia, everywhere else that the US is importing their fish from. Thank you very much.
Haydar, please.
Thank you, Don.
This is to advance it.
Too good. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to share with you some of the issues related to collaboration from practical experience that I personally went through over the past 25 years. Please read between the lines. I'm not going to say everything, but probably you will be able to pick up some issues that I cannot say. So we are talking about cases of collaboration, lessons learned. It's all about lessons learned. We started as far as 1990. We set up the largest operation in Malaysia. It's one of the largest in Southeast Asia, and with the government. there was a very high level of cooperation, I would say. Maybe not collaboration, but cooperation. And still the project is one of the largest of its kind, fully integrated. There was expansion. And the good thing that this project was chosen by the World Bank and the Malaysian government to be the center of or the focal point of developing the industry for the 2020 vision. They had a very ambitious vision to put Malaysia as one of the leading countries. So, when you see color, you will see always a slide and the same slide with a color. What does this color mean? This color means that despite all the efforts we had with every party, we didn't get a blue color. Actually, if the color is blue, means that everything is going very well. So, yellow means 50-50. And there are many reasons why is that. We'll talk about them later. Then moved back. During that time, we had a very, very ambitious plan to develop an SPF. Don, of course, you are a master of that. With Oceanic Institute was part of this in Hawaii, various governments, private sector. And really, it was a unique program outside the United States. And again, 50-50. So things are not, or did not move well. Moving back home in 2000 in Saudi Arabia, I joined what became one of the largest operations in the world, aquaculture operation. It's 200 square kilometer of area, and that is the land. We are not talking about the sea. So there were various academic, government, international R&D, and so on. And okay, light green. So things are not bad, moving well in a way, but probably not as expected by everyone. Moving back again, during that time, there was an ambitious plan to go into fish and algae. A very large plan to develop fish and algae or aquaculture and algae culture operation. There was really a very high level of collaboration, and despite all the efforts, we couldn't take off. What we thought was a collaboration, coordination, partnership didn't work to implement such mega plan. Around that time, the government decided that maybe aquaculture can become an economic development vehicle. So the government formed a high-level committee. There were 13 government bodies, 7 or 8 ministries involved, and academics and teams from around the world. Even Harvard Kennedy School was part of that plan. And we really did so much work for more than 5 years. Just recently, the plan was approved. And for us to say, probably this is where we get to know Dawn. We toured the world twice. Every country almost in the world which had a plan to develop the aquaculture industry or the algae culture was visited, including the US. Maybe we have seen, except Dawn, much more than anybody in this room, areas where, or facilities which develop or operate aquaculture and algae culture in the state. So it's blue. Until this minute, things are working very well. The level of collaboration between all the parties which was involved really reached a very high level of, even people were feeling responsible. And we managed after, the plan initially, it was less than 2 years program, and it took us almost 6 years to develop, but at least the final document is on the table. Simply, the aim is to go for 1 million tons of fish in the next 15 years, national production, using modern advanced systems. We'll talk about this also later. At the same time, I was the CEO of the largest fisheries company. It's a public listed company in the MENA region. This is one of the farms. And as you said, you see, there is no entities being identified in the picture. I mean, there was zero collaboration, I would say, and the result is failure. This is really a bad story about a company that did not really adopt any collaboration for various reasons. I mean, sometimes the company doesn't have much choices, but at least this is an evidence that without collaboration, you cannot make it. Though with collaboration, as we have seen also, we couldn't make it sometime, but here, without mean you will get nothing for sure. At the same time also, this company, Arasco, it's the largest feed manufacturer in the MENA region. It's manufactured 4 million tons of feed annually. And there was an ambitious plan, really. We learned from what happened over the past few years, and we decided that, okay, instead of, let's try to develop aquaculture and algae. So we formed the largest consortium, probably, as far as we know, in the world, to develop this plan. And as you see, of course, not all the entities are there, for sure, but we worked with the largest groups, or a number of groups considered among the largest in the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East, and again, things didn't work for a reason or another. We couldn't take off with such plan. Again, at the same time, we were trying to, this is a joint venture between US partners and local and regional partners. And we tried again to do something to this large operation. Okay, it's not red. It's not yellow. Okay, things are in the range of 20 to 30% success, unfortunately. But again, you see, I mean, there is not much collaboration really happening here also. Now, before I move to the next part, just to what did we learn out of this? First is that innovation, modernization, in this industry in particular, industrialization, diversification, integration, economy of scale for our region and your region probably, are the key elements for sustainable aquaculture in the 21st century. Without it, it won't happen. Now, we learned that over the past decades, many failures, of course, I'm not going to talk about the success stories. The failure, it's happened mainly because there was a lack of collaboration. By the way, the word collaboration means so many things, you know this better than me. We have to deal with each other as partners. We have to, of course, a level of trust has to be also high. And so, unless we choose the right partners, and the right partners choose us, unless we really collaborate with at all levels, with all the stakeholders within the field which we are working to be within, things will not work. I'm talking about now and the future. And the most important, when we talk about collaboration, it is not just one-way collaboration. we find that most of the cooperation, I would say, let me be more precise, in the past was a one-way. So it's a contract between two parties, the owner of the plan and a contractor who will deliver a service. It didn't work. Most of the time it didn't work. And what we want to see is a real collaboration. It's a partnership relation. I'll take it quick. So why we need collaboration? This is what we learn. As I don't need to repeat it, thank you, Dawn. We will be 9 billion in the next 35 years. This much of food we need. So where we are going to get that? If we don't collaborate, we will end up getting it from systems like this, and like this. This is not going to be good. When we want to produce 70 or 100 million tons more of seafood, more than double of what we are producing now, we are not going to produce it from such systems, and we should not. We should go for something like this, or this, or this. Don't. Or this, or this kind of operation. We have to be focusing on such systems, and this only will come if we establish the relation on a healthy collaboration ground. I will end up by Peter Drucker, the late Peter Drucker, everybody knows. This is a golden statement, really. Aquaculture, not the internet, represents the most promising investment opportunity in the 21st century. I hope he will be right. One day we'll say he was right. Thank you. And thank you. Before I end, I just want to, I took permission of Dawn. During one of our visits, we saw the striped sea bass, and it was an excellent fish, and we chose that fish to be, one of the species that we want to grow. And I think we had a deal that it will be named after me, right? So it will be Haydar striped sea bass or something like that. Yes. It didn't happen, and now Omar is culturing it without Haydar. So
I can add a Haydar.
He has copyright on it. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Don.
So, Thomas, please.
Thanks. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I want to talk about collaboration and cooperation, probably at a little bit more granular and smaller scale. My company is actually two companies, Norpac Fisheries Export. I've been in the seafood business for 30 years. We're partnered with another company out of Asia. We have the largest longline fleet in the Western Pacific, operating out of about 5 different countries. We have processing facilities around the globe. But back in the early 2000s, I recognized that data was a big problem in the seafood industry. And the slide that you're looking at here now represents the state of the art of the seafood industry, unfortunately, pretty much on a global basis. This is a huge problem because this kind of data is often unreliable, easy to have errors, it's siloed. People can't access it that need it. Often it's conflicted because the data isn't verified against other sources of data for the same transactions or the same landings, same catches. So this was a problem that we addressed internally in 2002, and we developed an electronic traceability system. We didn't call it that at the time. We just called it a kind of a production system. But basically it digitized all of this data. And so we got rid of paper and pencil. And once you do that, then you have the ability to push that data anywhere and everywhere at all times. Now this sounds fairly simple, but actually nobody is doing it. And even today, there are very few instances where this kind of information is being captured electronically at the source and then being passed upstream, so you capture once, use multiple times. So in cooperation, in order to get this information and this technology out into the world, we had to collaborate in order to bring together the resources because as you saw with the prior slideshow, oftentimes these projects will fail if you don't get the right players together, you get everybody with a vested interest in it. And really coming from the business point of view, I always look for the economic incentive because whether we're dealing with government, we're dealing with NGOs, we're dealing with industry, everybody's always looking for where's the money going to come from, how are we going to generate that. So that's really the common element in all of what we look to do is finding where that collaboration can come together to develop either cost savings on the governance side, better data access for good governance, better traction for NGOs to achieve their objectives, and ways for industry to operate more effectively and efficiently. So then we need to deliver that information timely and accurately to those that are involved. And then ultimately we need to drive that story and that value to the end consumer so that they're willing to pay for it. So the situation right now is much like the game telephone. You know, the messages are passed via paper upstream and across platforms, and oftentimes that information gets a little bit garbled. You know, what the information that was passed along, was it passed erroneously by accident? Was it changed because there was an economic incentive involved? Once it's on paper, it's easy to change things and therefore end up with information that, for one reason or another, isn't really the accurate information. And then that creates difficulties for industry, for governance, and so on. So we worked with two projects most recently. One is our artisanal fishers in the Nicoya Gulf in Costa Rica. So these are small fishers that are fishing either with small nets or with hand lines. The participants in this, Incopesca, which is the fishery ministry, Senasa, which is the agriculture ministry, also with food safety, Coape Tarcales, which is actually an association of fishermen that have taken control of their fishing area through legal processes and have developed strategic ways to drive sustainability into their catch by limiting gear types, restricting catch areas, and so on. Coape Solidar, which is a local NGO in Costa Rica. Fauna and Flora International, which is an international NGO with over 5,000 people worldwide. Insight Solutions, which is the spin-off company from Norpac Fisheries, which is the technology provider. And then we brought in Walmart and Marriott Hotels. The next project was a dropline snapper fishery in the Timor Sea in Indonesia. So these are a little bit larger vessels. They go out for multiple weeks at a time. You can see here, this is approximately the crew size on one of these boats. And they live on the boats, and they go out and they fish for a couple of weeks, and then they come back in and unload the catch. Participants in this was the Indonesian Fishery Ministry at a regional level, Packard and the Walton Foundation, USAID, Nature Conservancy. Then we had some industry partners. UD Domena, Primo Indo-ICANN, and Indotropic are local companies that are involved in processing and distribution. Norpac Fisheries, which is my company, another company that we're in kind of pre-competitive working together, is Indotropic. Then Insight Solutions, Costco Wholesale, and Wegmans. So these are our objectives, is to drive, the data real time. Current state of the art, it takes about 18 months from the time they begin collecting data to the time that information is available to fishery scientists and then be deliverable into active or actions that they can take in the form of governance. We've now driven that data collection at least to real time. So all of the information is gathered at the point of unloading, and that's shared across platforms to the governing body that needs the data into their database. It's also passed upstream to the processor, and then from the processor on up to distributors and the customers. Also, we wanted to improve accuracy, and we wanted to, most of all, catch more data. So right now, when you're writing down all this data, generally you're only catching a small portion of the catch, and only periodically, once a week, once a month, and so on. We want to catch not only all of the catch data, but we want to capture more data on the length of the fish, mesh size of the gear, if they're using hooks, the hook size, what's the horsepower of the vessel, how much bait they used, how much time they were at sea. All of this is to help define effort and also to understand the biological impacts in the fishery. So this here is one of the processing facilities where we installed the equipment and the software. So this is all driven to the web, so it's available, to those with access. It's all password protected and multi-levels of use and so on. And basically, we're using scanners and scales, electronic touchscreens and so on to capture this information. You can see there on one of these. Over here, they're capturing the length of the fish using a scanning gun, just on a simple board. They put the fish on the board, scan the tail, and it automatically captures the length. But that's assigning the length with the actual species. Oftentimes, there may be 4 or 5 species that are very similar looking. If you don't get that species identification correct, that creates a big problem when you're trying to do a length frequency chart on these things to understand if you're capturing juvenile fish. So that's their a slow motion version. They'll put 4 or 5 fish on here, and when they get good at it, it takes maybe a second and a half to capture the lengths of each one of these fish. There's a barcode that's derived from the system and attached to the fish. That barcode then moves upstream, and as they process the product, new barcodes can be added to it. These barcodes here are connected to all of the information related to the product. So you've got, in these trays, there's daikon, there's different types of sauces, and wasabi. All of that information is captured for recall purposes, product quality purposes, but it's also available as far as the fish and the species that were captured is all available to the fishery managers, fishery scientists, and so it's greatly improved the ability to manage these fisheries. We also put little spot trackers on the vessels. So these were actually invented for the automotive industry to track cars that are carjacked or stolen. They cost about $100 each, and you can put them on a vessel, and they will track the vessel out at sea, and you can have it ping about once every hour or once every 5 minutes, however often you want. And so you can see here, these are the tracks of the fishing vessels that are out at sea. This allows us to monitor where they're fishing to make sure they're not in the no fishing zones and MPAs crossing the line. You can see they fish the line here very, very closely because they don't want to go into Australian waters. Otherwise, they end up getting towed over to Australia, and they get 3 free meals for a few weeks. So these are the type of species in the Indonesian fishery that look very similar, but grow to very, very different sizes. Up until now, nobody had been actually identifying these accurately. In fact, we found 2 species that hadn't even been classified by science that were being caught commercially. Getting this information correct for the first time allowed us to realize there's over 122 species being captured in this fishery. And it gave us the ability to start creating these length frequency charts, that allow us to see the percentage that are juvenile, mature adults, and at optimum maturity. This way we can give feedback to the fishers and upstream to the consumers as to which species they need to avoid if there's a recruitment overfishing. And then ultimately delivering the information to the consumer. So this is information that's then encoded into the QR code. And so these QR codes can be scanned with a cell phone, and it delivers the information about the vessel that caught the fish, the fisherman that was fishing the fish, gear type, the exact species, weight of the fish, so on. So this is to help drive the value upstream so that consumers begin to identify fish not as, oh, it's whitefish, but as to exactly what kind of whitefish it is or other species, and then creating the value there. And then also creating value in understanding where that fish came from, the fisherman that caught it, the vessel that caught it, the gear type, and so on, which then helps to differentiate the product in the marketplace. The idea is we don't have to identify all the illegal fish. We're just going to identify the legal fish, and by default, the rest of it should be avoided. So through the cooperation of these different agencies, NGOs, fishery scientists, and industry, these projects have gained great traction and now have consumers that are buying this product. They're paying more for the product, excuse me, and it's now being scaled up and delivered to other countries and other fisheries. It's also even being used in aquaculture. So thank you very much.
Thought I'd open it up to any questions the audience might have for anybody on the panel. Okay, this is
Don, I'm kind of curious as to what kind of support you're getting from the state of California. It seemed like there's an awfully attractive green band within that 3-mile boundary. You're spending all this time trying to figure out how to operate federal water.
well, about 12 years ago, SB 201 was passed that created a permitting process for finfish aquaculture development in the coastal zone, and basically gave permitting authority and leasing authority to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, formerly the Department of Fish and Game. But the proviso before any permits could be issued is that a programmatic EIR that would serve the function of formatting the CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act review, would be generated and drafted and then reviewed and approved by the Fish and Wildlife Commission or Fish and Game Commission. We're 10, 12 years later and we still don't have a workable draft. So you have a regulatory framework that's been stated but not delineated. So it's basically if you wanted to do it, there'd be no path forward. And what we're trying to do in federal waters is create a demonstration capability that then hopefully would empower the state agencies to take a look at what's actually going on in a working farm and then craft the, basically form a regulatory framework around what's going on in federal waters. The difference between being in the coastal zone and the federal zone is, biologically and technologically, arbitrary, not arbitrary, but a line in the water. And so hopefully what we can do is demonstrate how the industry can operate and empower the state of California to allow this industry to grow within the coastal zone. So I'm not, the short answer, getting some interest on the part of the department, on the part of the state, and the governor's office is very excited. The GoBiz folks are jazzed about it, but, and they'll comment on any permits that we get, but they're not doing much right now to advance their own permitting capabilities.
So let me just help you. It's chicken liver leadership.
Well, you can say that out there. I can't say that. Any other questions?
No, it's Martin Attrell. I'm from the University Marine Institute. I mentioned yesterday that we're working with a major mussel farm in England. It's going to be Europe's biggest mussel farm. The interesting thing there is that hardly anyone in the UK eats mussels because it's an island nation. We've got a very restrictive diet when it comes to seafood, and we actually export most of our seafood. I just wonder what the situation is here in the UK, in the US. Is there a much better market for the more unusual seafood that perhaps might be much easier to grow, mussels, etc., or are a lot of this going to actually be exported?
Well, for the food that, well, right now we're importing.
Generally overall, not obviously the bass on that is specifically targeted at markets, but.
Well, we're growing 91%, or we're importing 91% of our seafood right now. And it used to be primarily shrimp grown in Asia, and now salmon is the big component to that importation. What I like about what Omar is doing is that, I mean, 20 years ago, nobody knew what a tilapia was. I mean, we knew what it was, but the average consumer didn't have it. Now it's in Costco, it's on every restaurant, and I don't much like it myself. It's kind of a flavorless fish, and not really all that nutritious compared to salmon or some of the others. So what's the U.S. equivalent? What is it that we could grow in the U.S. in the areas that we have that would fill a white, firm-fleshed product niche in the market? And I think striped bass is the perfect critter for that. It can be grown on any coast of the U.S. It's native in the Gulf as well as on the East Coast, and it was introduced out here in the West Coast. It can be grown in cages, as Omar's demonstrating, and the land-based aspects for the hatchery part of it is well understood and repeatable and all over. So what's wrong with striped bass becoming, you know, a 50,000-ton commodity a year? And then that being, instead of importing tilapia from Nicaragua and Mongolia and all over the rest of the world where we get it, how about just growing striped bass 5 miles offshore and put the jobs with the fishermen and the processors here instead of in these remote areas? There's a huge deficit in seafood. No matter what he produces or we're able to produce or anybody, we're going to have a market for it. It's going to be eaten. So it's really a matter of where can we provide it the cheapest and the most affordable. And guys like Thomas will end up buying it and distributing it for the industry that grows it.
I would like to comment.
Please.
Don, please. First of all, striped sea bass or striped bass is much better fish than tilapia. So yeah, I don't like, it's not about this replacing this, Don. I mean, it's really, this is one. And not 50,000, maybe 100,000. Okay. Okay, that's two. And I would like to add one point here. Today, U.S. is not among, I mean, per capita consumption in the U.S. compared to the average world is less, is in the U.S. And you still, with that average, per capita average, you are importing more than 90% of your fish needs, requirements. What if the per capita consumption increased and the producing countries around the world, which is expected actually, in Asia, will be consuming what they produce? You will end up, and those several parts of the world will end up having no fish to import. So it's really an alarming situation. Let us look in 10 years' time from now, what would be the situation if we continue going this way. Thank you.
Yes, Don.
Yeah.
Did you explore the option to establish a pilot scale project in Mexico, or just go direct in the state?
Well, I think we have. I mean, we started working with Pacifico years ago, and we provided striped bass, and those guys made it, and Omar represents U.S. investment. I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you had the opportunity to grow the fish here.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to do it there and here.
Yeah, so certainly. And then we also, there's another group down in Magdalena Bay that got its hatchery operational the last couple of years, Baja Seas. We provided them with their first yellowtail. But you know, when we start looking at the overall environmental footprint of where our food comes from, one of the biggest components to the carbon aspect of that is flying this fish all over the world. We talk about local grown, we talk about farm raised, locally, and yet we get our hamachi from our Japan and tilapia from Nicaragua. And, 70 miles south of the border is a hell of a lot closer than the other side of the ocean, but why not 5 miles out to sea? And he's employing 110 guys. Right now, we've got fishermen that can't afford to leave the dock because there isn't enough product out there for them to catch. What if they could go out and tend cages and bring that product back in? So I'm for growing the industry wherever we can because the product is needed. And one of the things I think we ought to be working on is a cross-border consortium for research, because that product's coming into the U.S. We want to make sure it's the best quality product we can get, and it is. But as they run into problems, why limit it to just what's going on available in Mexico? We could also have researchers up here working on it, and vice versa. Connell True, who's an advisor to his programs, worked on nutritional issues for our white sea bass that we have up here, those collaborations within science. So regionally, we could be doing a lot more to advance this industry.
I just want to add one point also, coming from an investor's point of view, looking at a project in the U.S. now versus a project in Mexico, it's much easier for me to justify time value of money, the cost of capital, to be able to invest in Mexico right now, because there is no viable path to a permit yet in California to be able to grow a business, whereas in Mexico there is. But at the same time, the knowledge and the capability to be able to do this type of aquaculture wasn't available in Mexico or the U.S. So we feel like we're developing it in Mexico. And as Don said, when and if the U.S. California opens up, we would be very happy to come. And it's in our plans that eventually we would like to do that because it makes the most sense.
And if I could just ask a question of Thomas, I'm just kind of curious about what the seafood industry thinks about the potential for aquaculture. I mean, is there demand out there? I mean, is it the type of thing that the U.S. seafood industry is anxious to see happen?
Well, of course, we're interested in promoting seafood, whether wild captured or aquaculture. It's a matter of delivering the information to the consumer in a way that helps to make them aware. In the U.S., it's 15.5 pounds per person. We just gained 1 whole pound per capita. Woohoo! Spain's 6 times that. So we have a long way to go, but people don't understand seafood, so they buy up in Seattle. You can sell cod, halibut, and salmon. That's about it. And unfortunately, in a lot of places in the U.S., it's really limited to just a few species that people know, and they're really not very adventurous, afraid to cook it. They don't know how to cook it. It came out dry. It was fishy tasting, whatever. So we really need to educate the consumer more. And then I believe that the American palate would love to have a wider variety of seafood, more shellfish, more varieties of finfish, and so on. But getting that out, there's a few organizations that are out there working on spreading the word on the nutritional benefits of seafood and so on, but we really have a big hill to climb.
So I'd like to ask one last question. Tom, you were referred to us by the Nature Conservancy, and I think you've been working closely with them. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's a great example of an NGO that is trying to work with industry and work on technology as well.
Yeah, what a novel idea. And I don't mean to be hard on NGOs, but I'm hard on NGOs. I'm really pleased that the Nature Conservancy has stepped up to look at the industry as a cooperative member in driving seafood sustainability forward rather than being an adversary at which you have to do battle with. And so they've engaged industry here on the West Coast with the ground fishery. They're engaging out in the Western Pacific with the tuna fisheries, down in Indonesia with these drop-line snappers, out in Belize with the lobster fisheries. And they're working with industry to help develop the solution, which is the cooperation I was referring to earlier. Without really good cooperation between, say, the fishery scientists that these NGOs hire, the fishermen themselves, with the industry as far as processing and distribution, and most importantly, and the key element of all of this, the linchpin, is the governments that provide governance and enforcement. And governance and enforcement worldwide is in really poor condition. In the U.S., it's great, but elsewhere, there's opportunity for improvement. So I think that the model that the Nature Conservancy Conservancy is putting forth of this cooperative way of moving with industry and helping industry to find better ways to operate and to drive sustainability into the industry is really going to pay benefits, because the governments will listen to industry more than they will NGOs. Many times I see that the NGOs and the governments are actually at odds with each other, because the government looks at it that this is an industry that provides employment, it provides revenues, it brings in foreign capital. So the industry is seen as a benefit, and the NGOs oftentimes come in and are seen to be at odds. And I think that's why the Nature Conservancy model here is really gaining traction in all these regions.
Thank you very much. It was a great panel. We're going to take a 30-minute break, so we'll come back at 10 minutes after 3, and then we'll make up the time at the end. Obviously, this is a very important issue for us. Don has been a pioneer here, and you can tell how he has been working with people. Haydar from Saudi Arabia, Omar from Ensenada, and obviously knows Thomas as well. This is an effort that we really need to support in this region. And so aquaculture in the Southern California Bight, as Don pointed out, we are probably the best place in the world to do aquaculture, in northern Mexico as well. So we really need to be promoting this jointly, and we certainly will continue to do what we can.